I'm Mark, and this is QGEMS. We're proudly sponsoring this event, and the next one, as Kasim said, we develop software to manage energy. By that I mean everything from smart metering to inverters to batteries, from domestic to industrial scale. Our platform is built using .NET, so this is very relevant to us. And please ask any member of our team if you're interested in any other information. So we've got carbon data, all sorts of things, and full API access as well. So if anybody's interested, please talk to a member of the team. And enjoy tonight and enjoy the pizza.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Right, I'll kick off. So I'm Peter Bull, and I live in Gateshead, and I work as a senior software engineer at Klipboard in their Newcastle office, just at Cobalt, not too far away. And we basically work with ASP.NET Core, Blazor, and a few other things in .NET. I've got over 35 years of personal experience as a developer, which I realized just recently, and 25 years getting paid for it. I'm also a Microsoft MVP for .NET and Windows development for the things I've been doing, kind of like this, so I appreciate a chance to talk again at the .NET meetup in the Northeast. I have actually used every single Microsoft UI technology for .NET there's ever been, and I also created some open source packages for .NET developers as well, so if you fancy messing about with SVGs for emoji or Fluent System icons, then you can download my packages. I've also got toolkits for .NET and for Windows App SDK as well. But you can check them out at commences.com. I also write my own articles and have a podcast at rogueplanetoid.com. And if you fancy learning .NET or learning more about .NET, I've got my tutorials, talks, and workshops at tutorialer.com. And you can also connect with me on LinkedIn. Happy to answer any questions there. And you can check out my repositories on GitHub as well. So .NET 10 is the most recent release of .NET, and it's a long-term supported release, so that's supported for 3 years. And there's some runtime improvements, new library APIs, and there's even support for standalone single file applications now, so you can really get started easily. There's also quality improvements and things like Windows Forms. So there's Windows Forms there, so if you happen to be still doing that, there's actually some new features for you to take advantage of, such as async forms, and there's also Fluent UI progress with Windows Presentation Foundation. So WPF is also still being updated, so if you're still doing that, there's still new features coming there. There's also new features in .NET 10 for improved form validation in ASP.NET Core. There's some reconnection UI components and persistent components there for Blazor, so it makes building Blazor applications a lot better. There's also new features as well with new syntax to define extension members, so you can actually have extension properties. So in .NET, you can have extension methods. We've had that for a long time. You can actually have extension properties now, which is quite a cool feature. And you can also have in C#14, which came with .NET 10, you can have field-backed properties. So there's basically a new keyword field, and you can access the sort of the backing field for auto-implemented properties. So that's properties for just the getter and setter. You can actually access the field that's behind that. There's also null conditional member access operators. That basically means you can assign values to something that could be null without it falling over or having to do some extra logic for that, which is quite nice. You can do compound assignment to things that could be null, which is really, really nice. But if you want to find out all about what's in .NET or download it for yourself, you can just go to dot.net. So Visual Studio 2026, that's the latest version of Visual Studio. So if you've not got it already, get it, because it's absolutely fantastic. The performance is amazing, and I can basically build any new solutions you might be working on or scale any existing solutions you've got. There's basically a refreshed, modern Fluent design for Visual Studio 2026 with new icons that make it look a bit nicer, and that performance again just makes it feel smoother. And even when I installed it in the earlier builds of it, it was still really, really slick, much faster than 2022, which was its predecessor. AI all the things, Visual Studio 2026 is deeply integrated with GitHub Copilot, and that understands your context, not just across your solution, but your repository or tools that you can use as well. So you can basically think bigger with this version of Visual Studio. It's also compatible with all the extensions from Visual Studio 2022, so most of the extensions you use today should work just fine. If you're still on 2022, you can upgrade and use those extensions ongoing. And it's built and ready for the latest .NET, but it's also ready for other development as well, like C++ if you want. So if you haven't got it already, go to visualstudio.com and download it because you'll not regret it. GitHub Copilot. I mean, if you've not heard of it, it is the transformational experience for developers. It provides contextual assistance for developers, so you can get a bit of help at work. It's my daily driver now. And with agent mode, it can analyze your code, even propose edits. You can ignore them if you want, but you can obviously take advantage of them if you do. You can help create new functionality and even help uncover some bugs or fix any mistakes you might have made yourself. You can also perform like a wide range of actions with GitHub Copilot, and you can leverage functionality such as model context protocol, which basically allows you to invoke things like tools that perform functionality. And you could even create your own MCP servers that you can leverage back in GitHub Copilot. Finally, Visual Studio 2026, of course, integrates GitHub Copilot quite a lot. And you can do a chat mode, there's an agent mode, and you can use that while you're debugging or while you're creating your applications to just basically get that help and get those changes directly. If you've never tried GitHub Copilot, you can actually use it online. If you just go to github.com/copilot, you can try it out for yourself. So, let's go through the A to almost Z of all the first-party UI technologies in .NET and how GitHub Copilot actually gave me a bit of a hand when I was building the demos for this talk that I'll show off at the end. So, starting with the first one, ASP.NET Core Web APIs. So that's not necessarily a UI technology in and of itself, but it can be leveraged by other technologies like JavaScript and things like that, using various other web-based client technologies if you want. You can create RESTful web APIs using controllers or minimal APIs, which is actually the preferred method that Microsoft have going forward, which is to build your APIs that way. And these APIs can work on Linux, Mac OS, and Windows 8, all the way up to the latest Windows 11. GitHub Copilot was quite handy here. I actually used it to create a minimal API itself based on the Note application from one of the other projects in the demo, and I also added some extra stuff that I needed, like an extra attribute to know which values it needed to use for the demo, and a .http file to test the demo with as well, which was quite handy. Next, we've got ASP.NET Core Web App this time. This is a UI technology on its own, and you can use either Model View Controller or Razor Pages, and you can create web applications for Linux, Mac OS, and Windows 8, all the way up to the latest Windows 11. GitHub Copilot, I used with an old demo that I had lying around where I need to write some JavaScript. Don't write JavaScript, I don't write it at all, so I thought I'll just get the AI to do it for me. So I said, when I've got a validation error, can you just keep the modal open that I've got on my UI? And I just used this JavaScript as is. I'm not writing any. I trusted the AI to write it for me. It was only this much code, so I trusted it was fine. I'm sure it works. Next one, Blazor. So Blazor web application, that's a UI technology. This is the latest and greatest for Microsoft for web technologies. And that allows you to create web apps using Razor components. They can support server-side rendering and client interactivity for Linux, Mac OS, and Windows 10 to Windows 11. GitHub Copilot was used to update an older demo that I had and just to allow some editing support and add a bit of extra functionality. Next is Blazor WebAssembly, very similar to its counterpart, Blazor Web Application. And that's a UI technology to create web apps with rich dynamic user interfaces that run in a browser. So that runs in Safari on Mac, for example, Chrome, Firefox, and Microsoft Edge as well. And I use GitHub Copilot here to take the original example and add a local storage option. So this is basically a notes application, and I store the data in the browser. So I didn't want to have to write that. So I basically got GitHub Copilot to create a provider using the library Blazor local storage, and it wrote it all for me, and it worked just fine. Next one, console application, old school. If you've been writing applications from the start, console apps would have been pretty much what you were doing, so they're still valid in .NET. And that's basically a command line UI technology, if you're not familiar, and that can run on Linux, Mac OS, and Windows 7, all the way up to Windows 11. And you can even provide command line arguments as well. GitHub Copilot wrote it. I just said, write me a console application from one of the other projects, Then just made some small adjustments. I had to tell it that the command line arguments had to be parsed correctly, not just the way it thought it needed to be done. But I just said, write a command line parser that does this, and it worked. And then I asked it to add some extra options to an interactive mode and allow it to be quit when you hit escape, which it did as well. So pretty much this entire application was written by GitHub Copilot, so I'll give it co-credit. Next one, not really UI technology, it's a bit of a cheat. Class library, that is the one in the middle of them all. This is where your reusable functionality sits. That's your classes, your interfaces, the methods. The common functionality that's shared with all of these examples sits in this class library. So what did I do? Not too much with GitHub Copilot. I asked it to do one thing. It was to add some required attributes for one of the UI technologies I'm going to talk about later. I'll not say which one, but if you're thinking where I'm going, it will be that kind of attribute. But that was all I needed to do. It was an old demo that I've brought up today and just asked it to add a few extra attributes that I needed for one of the projects. Next, console applications can be just a bit more these days with a local MCP server. I mentioned MCP, Model Context Protocol. Let's write our own MCP server. We can have that run in a console application, and that can run on Linux, Mac OS, and Windows 11. And, you know, it's AI. Why don't I just get AI to write it for me? So I asked GitHub Copilot, write me an MCP server tool for my application, and it just did it. And I was like, that's fine. So again, thanks GitHub Copilot, it wrote this part of the demo for me. And I just said, base it on my class library, and it implemented all the tools for me, all the behavior. So everything in there is all written by it. Thank you very much. Next one. So if you're a cross-platform developer, you might be interested in this one. This is .NET MAUI, and that is a cross-platform UI technology. This uses C#, which is what .NET uses, but also XAML. So if you're not familiar with that, it's kind of like a markup language for applications. So you're probably familiar with HTML for creating websites. This is like a completely different technology, but for creating user interfaces. And it's supported in .NET MAUI. And you can actually have it run on iOS and Android, so you can have mobile applications, and you can have desktop applications with Mac Catalyst on Mac OS, and it uses WinUI, so you can run on Windows 10 and Windows 11. This was an older demo I'd done, so I just asked it to update it a little bit. I noticed these notes didn't scale properly, and I was like, I can't be bothered to figure out how to make that work. So I asked GitHub Copilot, can you just take this control and make it scalable, so when it runs on the two operating systems, it shrinks down. I just said that, make it scalable. And there was a .NET MAUI community toolkit that I used, and I wasn't quite sure how to make it work anymore, so I just asked GitHub Copilot, get this pop-up to work for me now, and it did. So that saved me a lot of figuring out. Thank you very much. Next one, UWP. Might be a bit like, what on earth is that? So UWP is Universal Windows Platform. And this allows you to build applications using .NET and native AOT. This is a legacy technology, so the line through the icon is probably true. This is not for new applications, although I have written a new application with it, obviously, with this example. But this is for bringing your old UWP apps. So if you were writing apps for UWP, that would have been on Windows 10 back in the day. You can modernize these applications by bringing the UI with your existing UWP and rewriting that .NET code into .NET, modern .NET, because it would have used .NET Native before, which is like a super weird version of .NET that you don't want to use because it's really weird. So I hadn't done this for a while. I used to do UWP all the time. I was like, I can't remember how to do it. So I just said, GitHub Copilot, write me a UWP app based on one of my other projects, and it did. But I also found some issues because I used something called commanding, and commanding in UWP is weird because it's weird. So I was like, I don't know why it's not working. Can you create me some converters that convert between the new way you do things and the old-fashioned UWP way? And it did do that for me. And then I asked it to create some converters for me as well to make the UI work. And because it uses ahead of time compilation, I needed to make some changes to my class library. That's what those attributes were for. So when I asked GitHub Copilot, can you add some attributes? I basically said, can you add the attributes that make this class library work with ahead of time compilation? And it did, because I was like, I'm not figuring out where to put these things, you do it. And it pretty much worked. Windows Forms. I mentioned it briefly before. That is the UI technology that effectively shipped with .NET Framework when it first came out back in 2002, and it's still alive even today in 2026 with .NET 10. And it supports Windows 7 all the way up to Windows 11. So, because I hadn't done WinForms for a while, I was like, just ask GitHub Copilot to write a WinForms app. So I said, please GitHub Copilot, can you write a Windows Forms application for me based on another project? And also the control as well, because there's a custom control. I was like, I can't figure out how to do a custom control like that. Can you do it? Except it messed up. See this little corner cut off? When I asked it to do it, it was cut off here. And I was like, that's not right. Can you move it to the bottom instead? And I asked it, move it to the bottom, and it did. And it fixed it for me. So I got one thing wrong. I asked it to correct it, and it did. I can forgive it. It did everything else for me. It was a 2-minute job. The next technology relates to Windows Forms. That is the notify icon. So in the bottom of your Windows, you'll have a little task tray. That's what this is. And this application technology works from Windows 7 to Windows 11. And again, task tray, a bit complicated. I just said, GitHub Copilot, can you write me a notification tray implementation, please? Because I can't be bothered to figure this out. And it did the whole thing itself. It decided what the menu should look like, what menu options it should have. The fact you could even edit the items in the menu, it decided to do that. I didn't ask it, I say, make them editable. No, it did. So all the decisions it made, including how that works, which is actually quite cool. It was, well, you'll see it, but yeah, there's some clever logic it uses to update the UI that it wrote, and I was very impressed. So this will show up when the Windows Forms application is closed. Then we've got WPF. This is the UI technology of Windows Presentation Foundation. Again, this is like a legacy technology. It was actually introduced in 2006, so it's actually 20 years old. And this uses XAML, not the same XAML as .NET MAUI, but a slightly different variation. And that allows you to do your UI in XAML, and then you can do the logic in C#. And this supports Windows 7 to Windows 11. This one already existed. I had an older demo, so I just said, you know, the control, I kind of got quite right, so I asked GitHub Copilot to write a control based on one of the other projects, which was this one. So this is the project that all the others were based on. So when I've been saying based on this project, this is the mystery. So this is WinUI. This is the latest and greatest for native applications on Windows, and that supports later versions of Windows 10 and the latest and every version of Windows 11. And this allows you to build apps with WinUI, and that's with XAML as well. It's pretty much the same as it is on WPF. And then you've got C# for the logic, and this uses Windows App SDK. So all the cool new APIs are in Windows App SDK, and that supports MSIX, so you can install your applications with an installer, or you can distribute them on the Microsoft Store, but you can also distribute other Windows applications there too. GitHub Copilot was used to take this application and port it to the others. So the console app, the UWP app, the Windows Forms app, they all came from this application. So I wrote this one first and then asked it to create the others from this. There was one thing, the title bar control. This is something new in Windows App SDK, and I was like, can you add that in for me? Because I was like, you know, I've spent all this time writing this application, but that extra time to put the title bar in, don't really want to bother with that. So I just said, GitHub Copilot, add the title bar for me, and of course, it did. Last but no means least of the UI technologies, Windows widgets, the most popular UI technology. Not really, of course. But yeah, so these are a bit different. So these use adaptive cards, so that's like a JSON-based UI technology, but they're provided from a WinUI application. And actually the widgets board itself is WinUI, so it's WinUI running some content from a WinUI application. So it's WinUI, all the things. And so you can basically create a provider using Windows App SDK. So GitHub Copilot's quite good at doing adaptive cards, better than I am. So I just asked it to create them for me. So I said, create me the adaptive cards for my widget. I want ones for customization and for editing and paging. I don't want to figure that all out. So it did that for me and designed them, and it looks great. But to help us out as developers, we can also use packages as well from NuGet. So there's the commences.toolkit package that was really handy, developed by yours truly. And that provides functionalities such as dealing with SVG assets, like the ones I mentioned earlier, to do with system icons and emoji, or the note icon itself. There's also common data binding that pretty much all the XAML-based apps use, but UWP has to kind of have those converters. There's the Commences toolkit of Windows App SDK. That extends Commences toolkit, and that includes support for building a widget provider. So if you want to build a widget provider really easily and don't want to bother with all the complexity of native code and invoking platform APIs that I don't even understand, use my toolkit. It's not just like a please use it, it's like you will go insane. You know, if your widgets go white, you're in trouble. So this thing will pretty much help you out. There's also other packages from other developers too. So there's modern WPF UI. I use that to kind of modernize some of the WPF stuff just so it fits in with the other applications. WPF is getting modernized, but very slowly. So this just kind of jumps the queue a little bit. And then there's the community toolkit for .NET MAUI. So that includes some really cool, useful functionality. So if you fancy getting any of these packages to help you out, just go to NuGet.org and that's where you'll find them. So here are all the first-party UI technologies, pretty much from A to W at least, and you can leverage all the common functionality in a class library. So all of these UI technologies surface the functionality from the class library. And if you need specific functionality that isn't served by these, you can just use a package from NuGet. But we want to see them, right? Not just talk about them. So let's get our demo ready. Any questions at this point? Okay. Right. So what I'll do is I'll switch over and get my Visual Studio up so I can see it. So we've got the ultimate solution here. So we've got quite a few projects to go through, so bear with me. So we'll start from the top, and we've got ASP.NET Core Web API. So let's run that one. So there isn't really a UI for ASP.NET Core Web API, but there is something called Swagger. So we can actually see what's going on here. So if I basically make a call, there's no authentication, so it's a little bit easier. So if I execute that, we'll get back some of our nodes. So we're getting some responses back here. We're just getting a title, if you can't read it, some content, and an image URI. What's that? We'll find out later. Or, in fact, I can show you. So let's select that. There we go. So that's what a card will actually look like. And I'm really gutted I'm not able to get a zoom reference in because it's always good to get a reference in. So that's our first one, ASP.NET Core Web API. That's what it actually runs as. Let's have a look at some of the implementation. So we've got our endpoints. So this was one I got GitHub Copilot to write for me because I like minimal APIs. I actually helped peer review a book about minimal APIs, but you know, I'm busy, so let's get GitHub Copilot to write these. So it wrote all these endpoints for me. We've got that list one, which is the one I called, but we've also got gets as well. If you've ever seen a minimal API, this is kind of what they're like. So you basically have a little bit of functionality, and most of it's going off to a service I'll show later. We've got some extra logic, like for different things, like when it's not found. So we're doing all our nice things, doing bad requests when you don't do it right. Nice stuff, but it wrote it all, so I can't really take credit for half that validation because I can't take credit for any of it because it wrote it. But that's the first one. Right, next one is an ASP.NET Core Web app. Probably not me doing one of these days because you tend to be doing these things in Blazor. But this is our application, so it looks a bit prettier. And we can go in and actually edit a note, so we can change the color of one. So let's save that and make it orange. So now we have an orange note. You get the idea. So I'll just close that. So let's have a look at the code. So we've got our pages. So we've got some code here. So this is HTML for the most part with some Razor syntax mixed in. But the most important thing for the is that bit of JavaScript. So this was what GitHub Copilot, because I ain't writing JavaScript. I'm terrible at JavaScript. So this works, but I mean, it's not too bad. I probably could have written it, but I don't want to because I'm a .NET dev. So I said, write this. I just said, create that JavaScript does that. And it did it. So that was really, really handy. And then for actually editing the note, when I was in the editor, this is the experience there. So you've got just some markup here and some methods in there, which I'll go into a bit more depth. But yeah, so pretty much standard HTML for the most part. And if you're doing Blazor, it'll look very familiar. And of course, talking of Blazor, let's get it loaded. So this is the UI technology for web applications from Microsoft. This is the key technology that Microsoft's investing in, and it looks pretty much exactly the same as the ASP.NET web application. In fact, it pretty much is identical. We can go to our note, a little bit of a different UI experience here. Let's make our note green again, and that's basically nothing too tricky there. So I'll close that one, and I'll show you what that one is like. So I'll bring up the components and bring up the home. So this is the home page. It's a bit difficult to see that because it doesn't quite fit. But it's very similar, pretty much the same markup. Blazor's a little bit different. There's one thing you do in Blazor is you stick all the code on the bottom. If you ever did classic ASP, you would write all your markup and you'd stick your code at the bottom. That's what Blazor's like. So why not do the same thing? And that's the Blazor server application. So let's take a look at Blazor WebAssembly. Just get that one loaded. So this one got a little bit of a loading thing because this is actually loading in the browser now. What you'll probably notice is you'll think, oh, he's messed up. 2 of the notes are missing. But this is local. So this is using local storage. So actually this is loading the notes, not from where the other ones are getting it from. It's actually just in the browser's local storage. So we'll create a new note to fill out. We'll do a blue one, why not? Meet up with my terrible typing. Hello. I'll just see that. So but this is exactly the same as the server application. Exactly the same, except for one thing. And that's what I'll show you. So it's literally a copy and paste job for the other one. But the notes are being stored in local storage. So this service is the Blazor local storage service. And we get our notes. So we create the storage, much like you'd create a database. But I'm just storing a collection. I'm doing a little bit of pretend database stuff to get some IDs. But other than that, it's just storing a collection in the database, in local storage, just so it's consistent with the database. I didn't use a database because I thought it's just a simple data structure. But there are seemingly WebAssembly-based databases, but I thought this was easier. So that's Blazor WebAssembly. So let's go with console application. So this is a familiar interface to some people. You've got console notes, so we've got our options. So if you were loading a program back in the 80s and 90s, this is probably what they look like. And we can get our notes, so we do number 5, we can get our notes, and we can see it's green. It says it's green, we just have to trust it. The coloring of the UI, and that was Copilot. I just told it to write a console app. I didn't say what it should look like. So this UI, select an action, I didn't write that. It made that decision for me. The only thing I needed to add was the ability to escape, because it didn't think to do that. But console apps have that other feature as well, where you can actually provide command line arguments. So I can actually do list. So hopefully, there we go. And see it does it and then finishes. So that was it. The other one was interactive mode. This was list. Now, the way GitHub Copilot did it originally is it used configuration, so you can actually use configuration, but that only works if there's a value. So if it was like list something, that would work. If it's just list on its own, that doesn't work. That's why I had to tell GitHub Copilot, my use case is I don't want to stick something at the end. Can you figure it out? And of course it did. So let's have a look at its code. Let's do a bit of a PR on its code. So I did tidy it up a little bit just to make it a bit nicer, but all of this code, including the help stuff, thanks for putting that in. I didn't have to write that. But this entire class pretty much, other than just a few bits and bobs, was written by AI, which is kind of nice. It's like just those color choices, all of this prompt for missing edits, this entire class, hundreds of lines, fair enough, for, I'll put a comment on this saying, can you break it down a little bit, because it's getting a bit long. But all this code, almost all of it, written by AI. Very nice job it did. But of course, it didn't get the command line parsing right, but I just told it to do that. So this is the command line parsing, and it supports double dashes. So if I did double dash, it would still work. But yeah, this again, like this is what the earth is this? This is really complicated. Doesn't matter. Got AI to write. I don't have to figure it out myself. All I care about is that it works. But it does, and I tested it. But that solved the problem of getting that to work. Right. Let's have a look at our class library. So this is where the actual magic happens. This is the actual functionality. So we have our assets. So this is our SVG. So it's just got some paths. That's what defines the look of the node. And we've got a text element as well. So the Blazor and ASP.NET ones, for example, we're using this. Foreign object is just an object to basically have the text work and be the and it's using CGU script. But if you don't happen to have that, so if it was running on a Mac or whatever, it'll just fall down to cursive. So whatever cursive fonts on your operating system, that's the one it will use. We can also have a look at the class that defines this. So basically I have this asset base, that's mine. So all my SVG assets have this class. So if you want to write your own SVG assets, because you totally should, because they're cool, then you can do that. So this basically provides some basic functionality, and I've got some functionality where I can get some of this. So I can pull out particular parts of the elements. So that SVG is actually the source of some of the other applications, which I'll show later. But we've got things like that. We've got one of our features here, null conditional assignments. There's no inner text value. You can't do that until C#14. So that's a new feature there, null conditional assignment. Otherwise, I'd have to say, if this is not null, then do that. No, I don't want to do that. I just put it in one line. So that was really nice. And I kind of did that by mistake, thinking, oh, I've always wanted to write code like that. And then it went, oh, it works. Because I forgot that was a thing. So that's a small thing, but that saves a lot of thinking about these sort of things. What else? Let's see what we can show here. So we got and fieldback properties as well. That's a good one to show off. Let's have a look at the asset extensions. Let me see where it actually is. Oh, here it is. Sorry about that. Here we go. So just put that up a little bit. So we've got these, as I mentioned, you've got extension methods. Big enough as extension properties. So you see this kind of weird extension code, but this is new. It kind of looks a bit weird. But you can define extension methods with this syntax now as well. But these are properties. So this is an extension property. I could have just put that in my class, of course, but great for demos. But then I can have, so when it's showing that URI, remember when I showed that first URI, that's where it's coming from. This property is like encapsulating that behavior. And this is another one for the other part as well, for the simpler one I used somewhere else. But this is kind of nice, so all your extension methods can live in this new syntax. It's a lot easier because you pass in the object at the top, so you don't need this or anything weird like that. So it's much nicer, much cleaner, pretty good. And then because all the other nodes use a database, here's the database. So we've got some SQL statements. Yes, we're using parameterized queries because we're a good citizen. And it's basically just SQLite. So there's a SQLite database. This is the equivalent of those methods you saw for Blazor, but a bit more logic to deal with a database. But yeah, nothing too complicated there. So let's go back to the applications. So we'll go with .NET MAUI. So let's just get that started up. So back to UI again. So here's our .NET MAUI application. And we've got our same notes. The font here is a little bit different. This is Calligraffiti. This is an open source font because I can't ship CGU because it's a licensed font. So this is using that particular font. So on any operating system that .NET MAUI supports, it would look the same. And I can make changes to the notes. So I got this. This is the community pop-up. It's not the best layout, but it's all I could come up with. And I can save that and adjust the layout like that. Very nice. But .NET MAUI is cross-platform. So I wouldn't run the emulator here because it's a bit of a memory hog. So I've got a video. This is only pre-canned part of the demo, but honestly, it is the same code. So if I play this, this will basically play out me doing the creation of a node. So there's that same pop-up, this time resized for a mobile device. This is Android because this is recorded on the Android emulator, so I thought I'd write that. This would work the same on iOS. I can type the content and select a background color after that, and then save it, and then it adds it. And see, it's using the same font. So it's sharing that as an asset. So let's take a look at the code for our MAUI application. So for our actual dialog interactions, we've got this kind of interaction where we can new up our pop-up. So I've got a pop-up of my own, which is then using the MAUI QToolkit one. So there's the namespace. So if you've never seen XAML, you've got a namespace toolkit that's coming from the MAUI community toolkit, and all of this, which is a little bit overwhelming, but most of it's just set as. But we've got this. You've got your text boxes, title, content, background, data binding. So data binding is a thing in XAML. So you can basically use these kind of expressions to basically bind your data, and then we've got our buttons to click on. Nice and simple. We've also got our control as well. So we've got our note control. There's that font, Calligraffiti. And we've got our different things. We can do some clever stuff like building up some XAML in C#. Just as a path expression, just so I get the look of it. And here's that one of these methods. So this is actually extracting parts to SVG. So luckily, by an amazing coincidence, not really, SVG uses the same path syntax as XAML does. All the XAMLs use the same syntax as SVGs. So I'm actually extracting the paths from my SVG and jamming them into XAML, so I can get native looking controls using the same paths, so I don't have to do them again. Very cool. And then we've got other things as well to scale it, because remember, I had to get this to scale properly, so I couldn't figure that out. I was thinking, it took me a while, I would have figured it out, but I thought I don't have time, so I got GitHub Copilot to figure out how to do the scaling for me properly. Perfect. So let's leave Visual Studio for a second, and let's go to VS Code. So our next one is MCP. So if you've never seen MCP, this is where we can basically talk to an AI and get it to do stuff. So let's do that. So what I can do is I can say list notes, and hopefully it will figure out what I mean. It's determined because I've got an MCP server set up, and here we go, we've got it listing some notes. So these are the same 3 notes. Our remember one, our report one, and our same notes. So we've got our same notes. But we do have some cool behaviors. Let's do something like this. List all the yellow notes. So what will that do? So it's figuring it out, thinking about it. No, it just got the yellow note. Now, my application doesn't know how to do this. It only gets notes. It gets them, it lists them, but it doesn't do that. It doesn't have a search. So it has done that and figured it out itself. Pretty cool. We can also do other things, like create a blue note with the title MCP is cool, with the content being a sentence about MCP. So I'm asking it to do something specific, create a blue note, and it's asking me, now it's thinking, because it needs to check whether the background colors are valid, so let's say that. So that's another tool that exposes the colors. And then it's asking to run the tool to create one. So it always asks to create the tool. You know, you don't want it just to run a mock on your computer. So it's asking me each time, is it okay to do this? Let's say yes. And this will create the note, hopefully. There we go. Note created. MCP is cool. And if we get list notes again, we should get our extra note. So it's calling the list notes tool, which is exposed. There we go. Now we got 4. So we've actually used it. Let's see what the code is like. So this is our code for the tool. Yes, this is the tools that GitHub Copilot wrote. So all of these descriptions, all this code, not me. Sorry, I can't take credit for it. So this one, this tool gets a list of all notes with their details. This one gets a note by its ID. We've also got this one, which creates a new note, which kind of tells it a little bit about how to do that. The title of the note gives it some rules, has to be 50 characters. The background color is a certain range. Remember, it asked which colors are valid. If I asked it to create a fluorescent orange note, it would not be in the list. It would probably say orange, but it would probably reject that. So any color that's not in that list, it will go, no, I can't do that. There's updating a note as well, so I could update an existing note if I wanted to. There's one here, which is probably the most alarming of all, delete. So if I asked it to delete a note, it would ask me to run that tool, but then it would just do it without confirmation. So it would run the tool and just do the deletion, which is one of those things about MCP tools is that they're destructive, and it's one tool that you've said yes to. It will just do that action without asking you again. So I've left that one in there, but really, no. And here's the background colors one, which is just saying, get the list of available background. So that's all it knows. Even use the US spelling, you know. But that's MCP. So this uses a template that Microsoft have for creating MCP servers in a console application. And I just said, write all the tools for me because I didn't know. I hadn't done it before. Really cool. Okay, next one. So let's step back in time. It's the world of UWP. So we've got L1, got a note already here. That was handy. Let's delete that. Yes, let's get rid of that. So what I'll do is I'll create a new note. Do hello again. This is a test. I'll do that in maybe purple. It'll look terrible, but you know, it's just a test. It's a bit too long. But again, what's wrong with the notes? We don't have our other notes. Where's the other four? UWP's weird. It has something called isolated storage. So it's kind of like the browser storage. So it stores its own stuff in its own place that only it gets to use, and that's it. So it can't see the location on my computer. It doesn't know how to do that. It doesn't have that kind of access, because that's what UWP was like. It was all meant to be self-contained, so it could run on any kind of device, which wasn't super great. But this application has a slight advantage over the other applications, and that'll probably become apparent because of what I'm doing here, is the performance is really good. This is way faster than the other application by quite a bit. In fact, if you get these examples and run them, you'll see this is the best of the lot. Why? Ahead of time compilation. So this is running native code. This is a native Windows application. Running native code, not .NET. It's written in .NET, but it's not run. It's been compiled as a native application, so it has native application performance. Now I could have put AOT into the others, like console apps and stuff. But UWP, maybe a legacy technology, dead, but performance-wise, beats all of the rest. All right, I could have added it to the others and they would be equals, but it's nice for UWP to be in front for a change, especially now it's no longer supported. But it's a great one for migrating. So the next one is Windows App SDK. So this is a WinUI application. We've got our 4 notes again because it can see the file system properly. Unlike UWP, this is like it's the follower to UWP, so it can see all the notes. It does have that functionality. It has that cool title bar, which is probably not that apparent, but this is a new control that sits at the top, and it can have features like a search box and stuff, so you can have all sorts of cool functionality. And there's our MCP note, if you're curious about what that looked like. Here it is. We can even change the color of it. We've got a nice, we also got some real-time data binding. You're probably thinking, is that committing those changes? No, because if I hit cancel, it's just because the data binding in WinUI is so good. I've deliberately done that just to show off that in real time you can get a real-time update, but I'm not really committing those changes, not till I click save. But WinUI has this other ability, which is to provide a widget. And there it is. Our Windows widgets. So this is actually a WinUI component, widgets board now, running a widget being served by a WinUI application. And we can do a few different things. So we can customize this. So you can customize the widget. So we've got this UI, so we can switch to the different kind of notes. There is a known issue, which is this, which is a bit weird. But there's our notes. So all the notes are available there to the actual application. And we can put it back to our main one. So we can have our cool widgets. So you should totally be developing widgets because there are hardly any of them. So this is like one of the few, if you like. But yeah, that's your WinUI application. So let's have a look at how that's actually done. So the widget's probably the most curious one because you're just dying to get into developing Windows widgets, and you totally should. So most of the complexity is hidden. So this is the main provider class with a GUID. That widget provider base hides all the horrible things that you don't ever want to see. Native Windows APIs, OLE components, COM invocation. If you know about COM invocation, you'll probably cry if you do know about it. That's all hidden inside that provider. You don't have to worry about it, you have to see that. The actual functionality of the widget's in here. Just got a class library exposing all the functions. But for our widget, we have those adaptive cards. So we've got our note one. So this is the note. Nothing too complicated about it. So we've just got a couple of text blocks. That's the text you could see. We've also got the configuration one. So again, this is a lot of JSON that I'm having to write. No, I didn't have to write it. Of course I didn't. I got GitHub Copilot to write. So I just said, create me an adaptive card that has these features. It even put the little emoji things and everything. I didn't design that. So all of this JSON, which is what an adaptive card is written in, completely AI written. Did tidy it up a tiny fraction, but yeah, I had to be involved somewhere. And we've also got a confirmation dialog for deleting as well, and an upsert one as well for editing. So yeah, widgets are pretty neat. And to actually integrate them, it's dead easy. You just make a few changes to your manifest, and that's how that's done. I can also show a little bit of the UI as well. So we can have some resources. So in XAML, you can have bits of XAML that are in a resource file. So we've got our data templates. So when you actually saw the notes themselves, this is how they're displayed. And you've got a template for the upserting. I can show the main window as well. So that was the main user interface. There is an icon in there, an icon file. And we've got our custom control, which I can show you, which is exactly the same. This time it's using CGU script because that's what's supported. And again, we can have our control here, which is, again, leveraging that same SVG and parsing it accordingly. We are getting there. There's a lot of UI technologies, as you probably gathered. And this is every single first-party one. So here we go. So our WinForms application. Again, WinForms is cool, so you can see the file system, so we get all of our notes. This is the control I had trouble with. Cut was at the top, but now it's correct. It did that for me. Looks really cool. So that's a Windows Forms component, if you like. So it's kind of a bit weird compared to the others. And we can edit the note as well. So we've got a bit of a UI here. I can change that to being yellow, or I can change it back to orange. So again, pretty straightforward. It's very similar to the other applications. Now this one may be very hard to see, so I do apologize. But we do have a very tiny menu right here, down at the bottom. And I'll see what it says. It's actually got our 4 notes, remember, important in the menu itself. So we can go to our same notes. That'll bring up the editing experience for same notes. It's currently, we'll change it to same notes. That's great. And we'll save that. And we'll see, and what's probably not obvious except those in the front, it says that now, same notes, that's great. It's actually updated the title in the actual menu, which is pretty cool. And we can even go back to the application as well, and close it, and then to actually exit, just exit, and that will close that application. So let's have a look at the code for this one. So we've got the actual note control itself, which would have been really difficult. So Windows Forms is, because it's a bit old, doesn't support a lot of things. Doesn't support emojis, for example. Also doesn't support SVGs very well. So all of this code is to basically draw the same thing. So all of this weird logic to add paths and all that. This is the Windows Forms equivalent. It's not too bad, but and it added those comments as well, which was how the weird thing is the comments were right. It was absolutely certain it put that corner in the right place. It said it was in the bottom right. It wasn't. So good comments, bad implementation. But when I told it what it had done and told it off and got it to correct it, it was fine. And then what we've also got is some other code. We've got a confirmation dialog, and we've got another new feature in .NET 10. So if you're a WinForms person, you've been waiting for this for the better part of 20 odd years. Async form, so we can invoke a form asynchronously now. You couldn't do that until .NET 10, so if that's really been holding you back in Windows Forms world, it's here. So there you go, and it pretty much exactly the same. You can't really tell what's going on, but if you need that, it is now there. So yes, it's an async method calling an async form. Finally, we are there. But that task tray stuff, that's a lot of logic in there. So we've got our class here. Again, quite a long one. I'd have given it a comment about that. But all of this code, how the tool strip menu, how that updating actually works, very smart. It uses the dividers and repopulates in between them. Very clever of it. So all of this code, every single line pretty much it wrote. I did have to ask it to add a couple of things, but nothing really major. All this functionality, including getting it to load at all when I want it. When I close the application, don't actually close the application, load this, and then when I close this, then close the application. That's what I pretty much said to GitHub Copilot, and it did it. So very, very easy. And then Windows Presentation Foundation. We're finally at the end of our UI technologies. So we'll just load that one up. And this is it. Same notes again, because WPF, again, can see the file system. And you've seen this before. So I'll just close that. And I'll just show you a little bit of the code. So we've got the command bar and stuff like that. So we've got our node control, which is pretty much exactly the same. So this is all pretty much identical. But the one thing this takes advantage of is the modern WPF stuff that NuGet package supplies. So a lot of the controls, like the bar at the bottom and the editing experience, are all supplied by that. So they look exactly the same as the WinUI one. So this is very, very consistent with that. But yeah, so that is that's the actual code. Any questions before I go back to the slides? Yes.
Was it the case that you used one prompt and then changed the prompt for different languages? Or was it the case that you developed one and then asked it to remake?
Yeah, so when I asked it to do each one, I said, do a console app, tweaked it, then did the next one, So about 4 of them were completely AI driven. So I just basically asked it to create a console app, got that one done, then did the next one, then did the next one. I mean, in theory, I could have just started with one project and did them all that way. It worked well enough for those, and those are really complicated. So yeah, I basically did it, and so the prompts in my slides are almost exactly the same as the prompts I actually used. So mostly it was just like, that's great, but just make this small change, and then some other stuff I did myself. But pretty much those prompts, I said, write me a console app based on this, and that's it. And it produced the output I wanted, and then just had to fix the control, of course. But no one's perfect first time. But yeah, I just created them one at a time. Anyone else? Yes.
The MCP application.
Yeah.
What's provided to the AI agent so that it knows what services are available?
That's what that list of code is. So those methods with the properties on them, that's how it knows. So those are the tools. Yeah. So basically, I'll go over to Visual Studio Code. Actually, there's this MCP JSON file. So this binds it to the actual. This is what adds it to GitHub Copilot. So that actually points to my executable, or at least the folder for it. And then the actual tool is how it does that. So just get that up actually again. So when it's built, this is what's exposed in that functionality. So this method does this, list all available colors, and then it implemented this method for that. So each of these would show as a different tool for the actual application. So if I go to here and bring up the tools, I think you can actually open this up because I saw this earlier on today. So you've got the different tools. So you've got create a node, delete a note, not so great. Get a list of colors, get a specific note. Let's see, there's the same text. So it literally just elevates them, and it just runs locally on your machine, which is nice and straightforward. So, if I had more tools, they'd show up. Or they could all be one that does everything, but that'd probably not be the best way of doing it. But that's what it decided to do, and I agreed. And the get background colors, it knows to use that to constrain the nodes. So if I ask it to get, create a, what's the color that doesn't exist? Brown note with title test and content test. That should in theory know. So it's actually just ran the thing that brown is not an available color. So it knew that's out of range of the colors. I cannot create a note with a color that doesn't exist because it knows because it queried the background colors tool and found out the constraints were, and it won't disobey them in theory. I'm sure you could prompt inject it to do something like that. But yeah, so that's how it knows which tools are available. And you can add it, and it added those, but I could have added more if I wanted to. But yeah, a good way of getting started, because you don't have to have a web server. This literally is, you have an MCP JSON file, and you just add this. So it's just standard IO, because that's what it's using. .NET, so it'll invoke the .NET command. So it's basically just running that project. And then the output is the MCP stuff. So it's really, this is a great way to get started with MCP, is you can just ask AI to write one for you, then play around with it and see how it goes. So really cool. So anything else before I go back to slides? Yes.
If you could go back to Visual Studio.
Sorry?
If you could go back to Visual Studio, like the AI.
Yeah.
So I've noticed that you're using Sonnet 4. Are you using any different models?
I've just got an auto mode, so it depends on the mod. I could just pick any model. So I could use GPT-5 Mini and ask it the same thing. Some of them kind of go a bit off-piste, so some of them will start interrogating the code base and start running the project. So I did notice when I was trying this with other ones, they try and build the project and run it directly, which is not what I want. But so that's using GPT-5 Mini. So the model is just the automatic one, but yeah, but you get that behavior. This list, I don't have anything in my code that's telling it to output it like that. It's just deciding to do that itself. So a lot of this behavior is innate. Like it's saying remember yellow, import red. There's nothing in that tool that says to do that. It's just the AI is deciding to do that. It's reasonably consistent. Sometimes it comes out as a table, which is quite nice, but sometimes it doesn't. But I'm just letting it decide. If I put more prompting in there, more guidance, then I could constrain the way it displays it, but most of the time it's fine. So it's just, but yeah, any model will work as I've just shown. Anyone else? Perfect. Right. I shall slip back to my slides. But first-party UI technologies, there are some others. I'm not going to go into too much detail, don't worry. So the first one's Uno platform. So this is a third-party platform, which is a free open-source platform. This can create cross-platform native mobile applications, web applications, desktop applications, and even embedded applications in .NET. And this uses XAML for the UI. So it's the same syntax as WinUI 3. So if you're writing a WinUI app, you can bring it to Uno platform. Second is Avalonia. This is another open source UI framework. This allows you to create multi-platform apps for .NET for desktop, mobile, web, and browser. So it's another alternative. This also uses XAML based on WPF XAML, which is very similar. Also special case Avalonia. That project is bringing .NET MAUI to the web. So .NET MAUI is going to target browsers like Blazor does with Avalonia. So this is a contribution from them. So in the next version of .NET 11 or the next version of .NET MAUI, it will support browser using the technology that Avalonia UI has developed, which is pretty cool. Finally, there's OpenSilver. So if you're a Silverlight developer like me, you can finally wake up and do some more Silverlight work. And this will allow you to bring those applications that you've got sitting on your computer and bring them to the browser. Also WPF as well, so you've got some old school legacy apps. Those two techs will be a great way of modernizing them. So OpenSilver can bring any Silverlight-based SAML applications or Windows presentation-based applications to the web. So you can finally dust off the Silverlight. So, .NET 10 allows you to do a lot of things. You can create cloud and web apps with ASP.NET Core Web APIs or web apps, Blazor apps with server and client with WebAssembly. You can craft console apps and build local MCP servers to get right into AI. And you can have common functionality in a class library. You can also build cross-platform applications for mobile and desktop in a single project with .NET MAUI. Or if you want to live in Windows land, you can define applications in UWP, but you should really be migrating them to the others. WPF, which is fully supported. And you've got WinUI, of course, as well. And you can build applications in WinForms. So if you're a Windows Forms developer, you can still bring that experience to the play. With Windows Forms, you get notification area support, which is also supported in WPF. So you can bring your applications to the task tray, have a little task tray experience. And if you are writing a WinUI app, which you totally should do, you can have a Windows widget and write one of those as well. So, if I download .NET, go to .NET Visual Studio 2026, visualstudio.com, GitHub Copilot, github.com/Copilot, any .NET packages from NuGet, and if you want these slides and the full demo and you want to try it yourself, make sure it wasn't smoke and mirrors, go to github.com/rogue planetoid/ take a note of UI with .NET 10. And that's me. Yes.
Just to add to that list, Peter, all of the new technologies and the new Visual Studio all support .NET Nano.
That is cool. But yeah, so .NET is a flexible platform for any application you like. And yeah, if I did the third-party ones as well, we would be here for a lot longer. But I appreciate your time. Any other questions? Yes.
So, are there all the lists of technologies that you've got available? If you were a sort of stockbroker, what's your buy, sell, hold? And the choices of your build stock?
That's a good question. Yeah, not UWP. So don't start a new UWP project. That is dead. Just because it's supported in .NET 10 and I've just shown you it today, don't be going, oh, Peter said UWP was totally the in thing. Out of all of them, don't do that. But that is for migrating. So if you have a UWP app already, then go at it. Take that UWP app, stick it in new UWP land, and then go, that's great, and then go on. Right? Go on to one of the others. So all these technologies are fully supported, so there's not a particular strategy. You want to hit the broadest base for desktop, .NET MAUI. So if you want to, you want to hit mobile, you want to hit Mac, you want to hit Linux potentially, or the web, .NET MAUI. If you're just going to be in Windows, WinUI is probably your best bet. You get all the latest APIs, so every single API and every single feature that you're seeing added to Windows 11, those features get surfaced in WinUI. So if you see something cool in Windows Explorer, or you see something cool in, say, Microsoft 365 Copilot, that is a WinUI application. So a lot of newer applications from Microsoft sometimes are WinUI. So that is for a Windows developer, WinUI, definitely, if you want to just target Windows 11. You want to target cross-platform, .NET MAUI. Web technologies, Blazor. Blazor's where it's at. So if you're building a UI, build it in Blazor, or at least give it a go. Building an API, a minimal API is a really, really cool way of getting started. Plus ASP.NET Core Web APIs are really performant, and I mean really performant. And they support AOT. So you can actually run a minimal API natively on whatever operating system it's on. So not only can the performance be high with .NET, with just-in-time compilation, think how much better it is with ahead-of-time compilation. And you're talking about 100x performance sometimes over the alternatives. It's like Node.js and your others. So yeah, pick the use case that matters to you. If you really want to be obscure, do a Windows widget, why not? In fact, my challenge is for someone to do it before me. So I do not have one on the store. One of you hopefully will beat me to it. I want you to beat me to it. I'll be sort of disappointed, but then I'll be happy because you've done it. So totally write a Windows widget. The current widget board is a little bit weird, but because it's been updated, so there's a little bit of finessing on it. But yeah, basically, if you've not done something in .NET already, obviously give it a go. But there isn't really a technology that's going away except for UWP. That's the only one that's dead. All the rest are fully supported. Blazor's fully supported, it's not dying. .NET MAUI is fully supported, community supported, third-party supported. All of these technologies will live on, with the exception of that one. Maybe Windows widgets, who knows. But the others, yeah, no problems at all. Give them a go. If you need any help or support or just want to bounce any ideas, feel free to reach out.